What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Run Pure Sports MLB Sabersim show. We're talking some lineup building for baseball today. It's a Thursday, not your typical baseball slate. Lock is a little bit earlier. Also, no day baseball. At least there is a Showdown slate, so you can play that. It's the Cleveland, I almost called them the Indians, the Guardians, right? The Cleveland Guardians. It just rolls off the tongue. And then the I almost said the Timberwolves, the Twins. I'm all out of sorts right here, Jordan. My mind's on NBA free agency because there was some Timberwolves talk with DeJounte Murray going there. So I do love this time of year for NBA, and it's a great time for MLB as well. We got the golf going on, the John Deere Classic. So like we say it here at Run Pure Sports, we got all the sports, one price. We got Sabersim here too as well, talking about how to use that with the MLB. How is it going over there, Jordan?
It's good. I'm excited to be back on the show here today. It is kind of a weird slate. We got these two early games that aren't on the FanDuel slate too. So I think we're doing the DraftKings slate here today that includes these two 6 p.m. Eastern games. We'll talk about it. We'll break it down. I'll talk a little bit about, what makes Sabersim unique for baseball. And I think we can just go ahead and get into it here.
Yeah, and you said Sabersim is it's the OG sport, right, for baseball. This is the first one that it was made for. So, Jordan, why don't you tell the people a little bit about that? And that's a great reason why they should just be using Sabersim for baseball, right? Because this is the first one. This is the one it was made for.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So Sabersim began as a baseball simulator, way even before Matt kind of, found the DFS and sports betting applications here. I mean, it was a sports simulator, a baseball simulator as kind of just like a fun side project here. Obviously has grown a lot since then. Now, I mean, we've got over a dozen different sports we support here, but I do think there is something special about baseball as it relates to Sabersim in particular. Just this high correlation, really high variance sport is what is perfect for Sabersim in terms of, building lineups with the right kind of stacks, taking into account ownership, taking into account these ranges of outcomes of different players. If there was a sport where average projections mattered, I don't know if there's a sport where average projections matter less, and those are the sports really where using sims just makes such a big difference. So I know we've been hitting the golf content hard here. Really excited to come on and talk a little baseball today.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Yes. We appreciate it. We'll obviously talk about them for sure. And we're going to kind of go through and build a player pool here for today's games and kind of go through them and look. We can go through, different things. We can go through some 150 lineups if we get a chance. We can do 3 max. We do single entry. I think it's all good to look at all those different things and talk about it and discuss it. And I guess let's just start at the top with the pitchers, right? Talk about the pitching pool, because that's where I think you got to kick it off. Pitchers are definitely the most, we talked about the projections, not being as important in a sport of baseball, but you can make the argument if there is one thing where projection probably matters a little bit more, it's probably at the pitcher position. So what do the projections have so far on Saber? I mean, obviously this doesn't take into account for everything, right? If for some reason Mike Trout is out of the lineup, well, that is going to change the projection of the pitcher. So starting lineups are obviously important. We got those 2.5 to 3 hours before the games, depending on the team. But yeah, who are some of the pitchers you're looking at the top, Jordan? We got Aaron Nola against Atlanta. That Aaron Nola against anyone sounds appealing. I don't mind that. Joe Musgrove against the Dodgers. I like Musgrove. I'm not really saying I want to target the Dodgers, but they just got back after a long road trip. They were playing the Rockies last night. I was at the game, so I got to see them in person. It was fun to see Freddie hit a bomb, but Dodgers aren't really a team I want to attack. You got Logan Gilbert against Oakland. Oakland's a team we love to target. You got Severino and Garcia in matchups that are not easy, but they're both good pitchers. I mean, we have options here, right? It's not like a slate where we're just okay, punt pitcher. There are some good options at the top. Who's your favorite? I think my lean right now is Gilbert and Nola as my 1 and 2. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be the way that most people go on the slate here tonight. I think, here's one thing that's kind of interesting. So we've got all these guys up top, and Gilbert is the guy that's in the favorable matchup here, right? He's playing Oakland, probably the best matchup amongst all of these starting pitchers here. And then all of these other, top guys aren't really, they're not playing teams that I really typically like to pick on here, right? You've got, Nola's up against the Braves, high strikeout team, but also a team that, clearly can put up some runs. We've got Musgrove against the Dodgers, not a team I want to pick on. Severino against the Astros, not a team I want to pick on. The Yankees for Luis Garcia. But what's weird is the ownership projection projections kind of just assume that everybody is going to go and chase Nola. So, I mean, my gut reactions here, I definitely want to be on Gilbert just because I think he's got that plus matchup here. But first glance, I'm thinking maybe, I maybe more do something like match the field on Nola here. Don't let him kill me at 50% owned, but find my way into more Severino, Garcia, even Musgrove here, I think is kind of interesting. Just because, again, none of these guys have great matchups. So that's, my first glance impressions here. One of the things I was going to say that I think we should do, and I think we missed it last time we were talking US Open on this show here. I think we should start with a test build and just see what we're getting here by default, see what kind of exposure we're getting, what kind of stacks we're getting, and see how the slate looks that way. I think it's normally a pretty good practice too, just in general with Sabersim. If you're sitting down for the slate for the very first time, come in here, build some lineups and just see what the builds are looking like. What do you think?
Oh, I agree with you. That's one thing I think I wish we would have done last time. I do think what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of the Cubs game, the win game. There's a lot of good value plays, obviously, because it's the Cubs and the Reds. They're not like great baseball teams. They have good prices, wind blowing out. So my assumption is that's what Sabres is going to pump in there. Not saying we shouldn't play them or, have to get off of them, but I think that's kind of the route that we're looking at here. So I guess we'll have to see what pops up, but that is my lean of what I'm thinking is going to happen for sure here on this slate, but we'll have to find out here shortly. I do think, again, it's going to be a really fun slate. We have that one spot where I think it's going to have a lot of ownership. Then you can obviously, make game theory reasons to not go there. Before we do kind of dive in and look at what we just got, guys, if you could please hit the like, subscribe to the channel, helps us out a ton over here at Run Pure Sports. We got people filing in. We got 32 watching right now, but I want to tell you this. If you're watching right now, you're one of the loyal, right? You're out here watching this Saber show. You do not want to miss out on Big T and JSU in 50 minutes talking live Showdown golf. So they'll be doing that on the premium side. So be sure to check that out. But Jordan, what do we got so far? I don't see Cubs or Reds. I'm confused. Why am I seeing Rays? Talk to me. What do we got here?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, one of the things that's worth noting here, right. And when you build lineups with Sabersim, so it's not like what you are going to get out of a traditional optimizer. That's basically just going to say, here are the cash builds for today. Here's the best average projected lineups, right? So when we went in and built these lineups, basically I'm saying, for a 150 max, 10 to 50K entrance, what are some good builds for that particular slate? And the most important thing to note here is that this is already taking into account ownership. So I think what you're seeing here, is the ownership adjusted stacks. Like it's saying, maybe a little Cincinnati, we're getting to a little bit of Cubs, but, get to Milwaukee, right? Get to the Rays here instead. Some of these other teams that maybe you get a little bit of an ownership discount compared to some of those teams. And that's the direction it wants to go. And I think the main reason why we're seeing that in particular is because Sabersim's saying, eat the pitching chalk, right? Nola, Gilbert, best place on the slate. We'll get some exposure to some of these other guys, eat the pitching chalk, and then get off that Wrigley win game and play, other good hitting teams, just not in the win game in Wrigley, right? The Rays, Milwaukee lineups both look, pretty good most of the time out there as well. So I also, I kind of like this. I like that we're getting a little bit of Oakland here, some direct leverage against Gilbert as well, 15% right off the bat, and actually the Braves too. So you can see how this build's coming together, right? It's like you get these two lower owned stacks, good hitting teams, a little bit exposure to that win game here, and then the direct leverage against those top pitchers right at the top there.
Well, here's another question for you. What did you run? You ran 150, but did you run it with the sim variance high?
So I did the default settings for a 150 build, right? So we're going to have correlation, right? We want those big stacks. We're getting the right kinds of stacks we want right off the bat here. But it's also a pretty high sim precision, pretty high ownership fade. So
do we want to run it again and just run it with like all of it, just like normal projections to see what's popping out? Is that important to do? What's your thoughts? Like taking everything out of it, or what's your kind of opinion on that?
I'm sure. Yeah, I think that's fine. If you want to kind of see if you're like, wait, I just want to see like what are the best plays to play on this particular slate, I think you could run something like, maybe something a little bit more like this, which is basically going to be, ignore ownership for now, because all we're trying to do is figure out what the slate looks like, turn down sim precision a little bit, maybe to halfway here. And we can do another build and just see, this is going to show us a little bit more just, hey, what do the best plays look like? Let's take ownership out of it.
Well, it'll tell you what the field's going to do at times, right? Like, yes. And of course depends what they're using, right? But I think that sometimes can give you a lean of like, okay, well, if the Rays, I could see someone run those 150s and be like, oh, the Rays are going to be popular, so I should play someone else. Yeah. And then they're randomly now on like maybe a chalk option that they didn't expect. Now, I'm not saying I know what the chalk is right now or anything like that, but the point I'm getting at is I think it's better to run like the raw projections to see first and then go. I think running both is a good start. I think that's a great starting point for sure.
I think that's great. Yeah. And let's see. I'm curious to see what we see here. One thing I noticed is that like, even with the win situation in Wrigley here, we're not projecting that game to be that crazy at the moment, just on the main screen. It may be possible that that's going to update throughout the day as we kind of get better weather data pulled in and things like that. But for now, like here, I'll go and show you. And I don't know what happened to that build here, but there it is. We'll go back to that in a second. But I was just noticing, 4.8 runs for the Reds, 4.6 runs for the Cubs. It kind of seems like, and we're doing the show here in the middle of the day, right? The slate's 5 hours away, or longer than that, actually, right? We got a lot of time. It makes me kind of think that actually that we're just like under on this game right now. I would not be surprised to see this come up later throughout the day. But for now, let's see what we're getting.
Yeah. By the way, I'm currently seeing a 10 implied total on it. So I think that needs to be, I mean, personally, here's the thing. I think it's a great way to showcase it after we do this. We can bump it ourselves, right? To what it is projected for.
Yes.
And if we think it's going to be 13 runs, like that's something we could show in a second here. Let's see what the projections are showing for like the normal setups though, because I'm curious.
Because I mean, I think this is a situation where I kind of disagree even with this now, right? Like, so okay, Nolan Gilbert, right? That makes sense. That tracks. That's what we're expecting. But now we're just seeing a ton of Brewer stacks, and I do think the Brewers might be, a somewhat popular option tonight, especially as like maybe the first team people go to get off of the Wrigley chalk. But I think I would be expecting to see more Wrigley stacks here. But we're just not
now let's go back and let's show that. I think that's a good idea. Like, let's go. I see you switch to it really quick. The Cubs were at 28%. I think the Reds have decent ownership too. So those stacks popped in a little bit more on that last build. And when we bump, this might be good to look at. Let's see what those percentages are when we bump it to the 10, which is what it's currently implied for. What will we see, and how much more will it pop? I bet it'll pop a lot more.
Yeah, so I'll just bring them both up to 5 runs. So this is a pretty cool feature on Sabersim. So what you can do here, right? And one thing to note is that this only works at the moment if you're using the Sabersim projections. So you do need to be using the Sabersim projections to use this over here. But we can bump this up here and bump each of these teams to 5 runs. And then what we'll do is we'll go through and we'll look at our simulations and say, okay, let's only use the simulations where on average these teams score 5 runs, and then adjust all the player projections accordingly here. At the moment, there is, one thing that's not totally working right with this here, where when it's working correctly, you'll actually see the updates to these player projections here. They're not showing on the front end of the app at the moment. It is working on the back end. So you can still do these. We just can't see it here at the moment. But I think we should run one more build here now and see what we get instead.
Yeah, I want to see what the difference is in those Cubs and Red stacks. Like if they pop even more, because I think they will. I think
they will. And I think our team totals for these teams are probably very likely to come up before the end of the day anyway. So
yes, and that's one thing they mentioned. Like you said before, we're doing it 4 hours before. So like if someone's like in the chat, like, oh, that total's wrong. It's like, yeah, I mean, adjustments will be made. That's how things go. So it'll adjust throughout the day. And when you see those adjustments happening, that means it could be getting steamed up more and more, right? Like
yes,
the guy I thought would get steamed yesterday. I don't remember what happened because I was at the game, like the Dodgers game. So I didn't look like that deep of like what the slate was like. But did Hunter Green get steamed up yesterday, Jordan? Is that what happened?
I believe so. I think he was one of the chalkier, like that kind of value pitchers on the slate.
Yeah. So it felt like at the first glance of the slate, I was like, Ohtani, Manoah, the best route to go. Mm-hmm. Not that hard to do. And then I said, but if you make it Hunter Green, you can get like a little bit more meat on the lineup that you felt good about. And I felt like he wasn't that, like his projection wasn't that bad compared to Manoah's, and then it would just boost up. And by the way, that bump really moved our guys up.
Yeah.
Right? It moved
100%.
Up the Reds and it moved up the Cubs to enough. Now let's do this now. Because again, we care more about stacks, right? I'm not saying, Wilson Contreras is the guy you got to have because X, Y, Z. We're just currently talking about stacks. Let's go into Saber, run it again, and run it with all the variants up and see now where it puts them compared to where it had them before. Because again, we saw a lot of Rays before, right? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's going to say this projection's so strong, it's going to look for pivots in other spots, or it's going to say, it's baseball. The projection doesn't matter as much. And I'm curious to see what it does. I think you understand what I'm getting at too, because again, we didn't have like the proper projections. It felt like it.
Yeah. So real quick, since we're just like talking about and doing all these different builds, I want to mention what the sim precision slider is actually doing for people that aren't familiar with it out there. So we have simulations, play-by-play simulations for every game on the slate. And this slider is basically controlling how many sims are you looking at as we build each lineup. So the default value for this build, 150 max 10 to 50K, the one we started at, is 8, which means we're taking into account 6 sims for each game when we build every lineup, right? And when we brought this down, we looked at it at 5, which is 28 sims per lineup, right? So as the slider gets smaller, gets lower, we're going to value basically what happens on average more. As this gets bigger, we're going to like value outlier performances, single simulations, small sets of sims a little bit more. So yeah, we'll bring this back up. Do you want me to bring the ownership fade back in here as well, or just leave that off?
Yeah. Like bring it back to the normal settings, right?
Okay.
And the reason why is I want to see what it was doing before, like with normal projections. I want to see what it's doing with it. And that's how you can help make yourself some decisions and understand what the optimizer is doing. One thing that you might see as a common theme is, well, because you're going the cheap Rays or the cheaper Brewers and you're going the cheaper Cubs and Reds, like maybe going the cheaper route is the more optimal route based on the math. Or if you really want to get different, maybe like a full stud spend up team is so contrarian that's worth going to. So these are like the talking points that I think are good to discuss. And this is how you want to think about an MLB slate, right? Like, it's not just like NBA, you plug in some projections, you make your takes here and there. Like, you do have to like think about the situations, and there's a lot of different moving parts. Like, and when lineups come out, sometimes it changes things, right? Like, for instance, with the Dodgers yesterday, I think a big thing that changed with them and steamed them up, they weren't like super high on, but I think Jake Lamb being added to the lineup naturally helped that team. Like, oh, it's easier to get the Dodgers in, right? Because there was that 2K punt option, and there wasn't really like many third baseman options that you could go to. Like Justin Turner, he's fine, but he's like one of those last spend ups where that makes people uncomfortable on their Dodgers team. So lineups can affect things, right? So like we're running stuff now, but everything can change with one guy getting a big bump in the lineup. Like Lenyon Sosa for the White Sox. There was one White Sox slate where they were going to be chalk, and then we get a 2K Lenyon Sosa in the one hole. Like that just changes things and makes them even more chalky. So these are just like things to think about when you get lineups that come out.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously very important, to run things once you have all the final lineups out. I know baseball can be, I think you can be a little bit more reliable. You can get something out of doing this in the middle of the day. When we were doing earlier basketball, it's like, who knows what's going to happen, right? We could be talking all day here, and then Giannis gets ruled out at the last second or something like that. So, but yeah, I mean, this build's finished now, and now we can kind of go back to these stacks here and look again. And you can see, I think it makes a little bit more sense now what we're getting, right? Not in love with the red stacks and the Cub stacks as much, with that sim precision turned up, with that ownership fade turned back up. And it starts to make a little bit more sense why we're getting to a team, like the Rays, like Milwaukee. I wanted to see just who's pitching here for some of these teams here.
Yeah, by the way, the encouraging part about the Rays, which I do like them today, and one thing to like about the Rays, they're going against Kikuchi.
Yes.
And he has given up a ton of hard contact. He's definitely a pitcher that I like to target. They're cheap. They're going to be righty heavy enough. And the roof could be open. That's a 9 total, right? That's another thing that could be a little bump there that maybe gets sneakily overlooked there. So I think that's worth noting there. I don't know what you want to do now. If there's anything else you want to check out, or if you want to go into the projections and start changing stuff, like,
yep, let's go back.
Yeah. Is that how you do it? I was going to ask, what is your process here? Do we start here and like X out pitchers? Do we go higher on guys and lower? What is your process here with starting with the slate? Because I typically X pitchers out. I don't know about you.
Yeah. So, what I do, and again, like similar to how I kind of even think about the golf stuff, right? So I typically, for me, I'll leave everybody in my pool. I'll build a big pool of lineups with a pretty high sim precision. And I do a lot of my work after the build has been built. Not to say that that's just the right way to do it. I think you can get a lot of value of doing some of this stuff ahead of time, especially if you want to make a lot of changes. I think you're better off doing things before the build. But for me, I like to do things after the build. I think, for the purposes of walking through this here today, I think we should go through the player pool and make some adjustments here, right here.
Well, so I don't run 150 lineups in baseball that often. So like, this is not like my bread and butter or anything. So like, I'll say I'm down to do whatever you want to do. So let's talk about the pitchers. And for me, I typically like to, especially when I'm like running my teams, and I'm like going through to look at teams I want to enter, right? I use optimizers, but I don't like when I hand pick the teams, right? I'm not just like, oh, here's my CSV and I upload it that much. So I typically like if I run stuff and I see a pitcher in there, like let's say I'm getting a ton of Kikuchi, right? I'll be like, what? I don't want to look at Kikuchi teams. I ran 30 teams or 50 teams to run through and just look at different combos and see what's happening. I don't want to even see the Kikuchi combos, and it's a waste of my time. So I just X him. So that's definitely one I think we want to X.
Yeah, that's I was going to say, let's just remove everybody here and just add some of these guys back in. What do you think?
I'm rubbing off on you, Jordan.
Yeah. I know that's your game there.
It's just easy. It just makes it easier on me. I'd say that. But so I want to add Aaron Nola, right? Yep. I think that's a good idea. I want to add Logan Gilbert. We can also play Logan Gilbert and we can play the other side too, right? Because you can play the other side for like a mini stack leverage as well. Like there's ways you can do both. So I just wanted to call that out. Is Ian Anderson's like the cheap guy that like is going to be like a conversation point today, right? Like, do you go all the way down to him? What is your thoughts on Ian Anderson? I think he's worth adding to the pool for sure, especially if like you're kind of more like you don't want to have it too constrained on too many pitchers. I think he's definitely a guy we got to add in there.
Yeah, I think it makes some sense. I feel like I never like playing Ian Anderson, but I'm good with it. Again, like a team that, the Phillies can strike out. So I'm fine putting him in there. I honestly, I kind of want to add these other names here at the top too. Again, not the greatest matchups for Musgrove, Severino, and Garcia, but you're going to get a crazy ownership discount on them. And again, like it's not like Nola has the best matchup in the world either. So I want them in the pool.
Well, I like the idea of putting them in the pool because I'm curious to see, even though the matchup's hard, like how much do we get of them, right? Like,
right.
And it can tell you a little bit about the slate if you have those guys in there. Let's say you're getting a lot more Severino Garcia. Well, that might be telling you you're eating a lot more chalk bats and then you're getting a little different at pitcher. So it is going to at least give you some information on the slate that I think has value. So I'm down to put them in the pool and then we can easily X them later. It's not like we can't. Mm-hmm. I don't hate putting Brubaker in there for cheap because like we're gonna have to have some cheap pitchers.
Yeah,
right?
and I was gonna say I'll put Hauser in too. I mean, he's 5'4" and he's pitching against the Pirates, so I think that makes some sense.
I want him in there too. If the wind was blowing in, I'd be more interested in Hendricks. Because it's out, I'm not. So I don't really want him. I'm trying to see if there's any these like other guys, it's tough.
I feel pretty good with this list, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah, because Ash, I don't want him. What do you think of White? That Padres lineup just isn't good right now. You know what I mean? That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, and it's a low total, 4-1. I mean, nobody's gonna play him.
Let's put him in and see what happens. I'm just curious, right? Like let's throw him in. We'll see. We can easily X him.
Yep.
And it might not even give us that much of him, but I'm just curious to see what it does. So let's do that. Now we got to figure out what we got to do next here. Trying to think through the scenarios.
Yeah. So, I mean, are we good on pitchers or what do you think?
Yeah, I'm good on pitchers. Let's leave it at that.
So I'll jump in here. So on the hitters, one thing I would recommend is I think if you want to adjust some of these hitters, I think your best thing to do here is to adjust some of the team totals. If there's teams that you want to get a little more of or get a little less of, I do think one situation where you can make some mistakes with Sabersim is getting too cute with your hitting pool, right? You said it before. We're mostly concerned about stacks. That's like the main thing we're trying to do here is just stack up different teams. Sabersim's going to handle the stacking constructions, who's getting used as a one-off, who's getting used as small stacks, all of that for you. I think it's easy to waste some time and just get too cute trying to figure out what batters from every single team you want. So I would say, if are there any teams that you want to kind of like take a little bit more of a shot on in terms of stacks, or anybody that you kind of want to get away from now that we've run a couple test builds or anything like that?
So I definitely think we're going to get Rays. I think I like them more than I realized going in, just like first look, like quick glance. I was like, well, why are we getting that much of the Rays? Well, it makes sense. Kikuchi. I don't know if we have to raise them. I wouldn't mind raising them if we're getting not enough of them at some point, but I say we raise them. Let's move them to 5. Is that a good? Maybe I still want it below the Cubs totals. The problem, I think,
maybe 4-8.
Yeah, let's move in the 4-8. I kind of want to move the Cubs and Cincy to 5-2 each, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
And then I'm trying to think of who else.
So here's a couple things. So I'm thinking. So we have a slate here where we have the Braves, the Yankees, the Astros, and the Dodgers all on the slate, and nobody's going to play them. And it
Yes.
just seems weird to me. So I was going to give just like a little bump to those teams just because I don't know the last time we got a slate like this where these like elite, just like not even hitting elite baseball teams are out playing tonight. And like everybody's going to, play Wind and Wrigley, and they're going to play, Brewers and, maybe Mariners, I guess, even maybe a little bit more than some of these teams. It just seems weird given the strength of the lineups of those teams.
Let me look. I'm trying to see, what is your take on, I want to figure out the situation for Whistler. Like, because like the Rays, they can do bullpen games, right? At times. And I believe that's like one of them they're going to mess around. Like, I think the Jays are really interesting today. Do you have a take on that? Because they're a team that I'm kind of intrigued by. Like,
yeah,
the Jays at no ownership, like that sounds like something to be kind of interested in. But I don't typically love targeting like these spots where it could just be you're not getting like the full game from a guy like Whistler. Like, how long do you think he would go in this spot?
Are you looking at like playing Whistler or playing the Jays?
I'm looking
bats?
at bumping the Jays, right? Like
yeah.
bumping, because like, but Whistler doesn't go deep, right? He's not. So like you're targeting a bullpen game. What is your thoughts on that? Because it's the Jays in a spot where like they're at home. There could be the roof open.
Yeah.
An elite offense that's not owned has been, if you think about like the last month, they've been a pretty hot offense, but it is a bullpen game. Like the Rays are a pretty analytically driven team. They kind of know what they're doing. So what's your thoughts here on that?
No, I like it too. I mean, again, it's like it's an elite lineup and nobody's going to play them. And the ownership today seems so weird to me that like, I don't know. It just seems like people are going to overwhelmingly gravitate towards this win game here in Wrigley. And there's just elite hitting options elsewhere that people aren't going to get to. So I'm fine giving them a little bit of a bump too. We've given a bump to most of the teams here now, which again, I think is fine just given the context of the slate here. I personally, like, as I'm thinking of my strategy, I'm thinking I'm probably going to be pretty far off this Wrigley game at this point, just because there's so many other teams that I want to get to.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get off it, but we'll see. I mean, but I understand why we should, right? Obviously, I haven't ran through enough stuff. I want to see what it does. Like, when my big issue I have is like, if I do like, and this is something maybe we can run through, and I want to ask you this question because like, let's say we put the Jays total at 6, right? I'm not saying we should, but let's say we put it to it. How much more Jays would we get based on the math, right? Because jamming him in there is kind of difficult. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's one of those things when I look at slates and I go through my teams, the Dodgers are a great example. When you go through the Dodgers and you have a slate with them, and I'm paying up for top end arms, and it's hard to get Dodgers bats in. If I see my team and my team is set up with, like, I'm looking at the Dodgers projected lineup and say, let's say my team today is, my 5-man is Freddie Freeman with Bellinger, Chris Taylor, Lamb, and Lux. Like, I'm not super excited about that. Like, I don't want 4 guys from like the bottom of the lineup typically. Now you can make the argument that Dodgers are a team that like it's a strong enough lineup, but the point I'm getting at here, Jordan, is like, I want to make sure I'm getting enough of the big bats, because if they do boom for a massive game, well, those other guys, one of them could have like a 2 home run game. And if I don't have him, I'm dead money. You know what I mean? So that's something I definitely think about for sure when I kind of look through teams. So that's why I'm saying, if the Blue Jays, if it's jamming in all just the cheap Blue Jays, that's not as ideal for me. I want to make sure if I am playing these Blue Jays, I need, if we're talking about between Hernandez, Kirk, Guerrero, Bichette, and Springer, like, I ideally want to probably at least 2. For me, it's probably I want at least 3 of those 1 through 5, and then mix in 2 of those other guys. What's your kind of thoughts on that? Like, I don't know if you go through and look at like the 1 through 9 and make adjustments like, oh, I don't want this hitter, or like, I want to make sure I have a group of like getting 3. What's your kind of overall thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I was actually just talking about this on one of my streams yesterday here. I don't really sweat the batting order that much. I think like in general, the ownership discrepancies from the top of the order and the bottom of the order make up any actual difference in upside there. Right? I actually, a lot of times one of my favorite ways to like get to a more unique way of stacking a team up is to play the bottom of the order. Like, especially for like the Wrigley game tonight. If I get 2 stacks of this team, I think probably one of the more likely ways I'll do it. Maybe not with these 2 teams, just because the bottom of the order is really don't look as good. But a lot of times the way I'll do it is actually through stacking up the bottom. And I mean, you can kind of see here that ownership discount as we look at the top of the order versus the bottom. I guess the Reds aren't the best example of that, but I don't know. And that's just my take. A lot of times I think, people kind of worry about the batting order a little bit too much. One of the things I always like to look at is these 95th percentile projections on Sabersim, which is like, what's the ceiling that they only hit 5% of the time? And you can see just going down the list here. Let's go back to the Jays, since that was your example, right? Obviously there's a difference in who these hitters are. There's a difference between, Biggio and Vlad Guerrero Jr. on average, but in any single simulation in the top 5% of the outcomes, right? Like, these guys have upside. There's upside there for Matt Chapman. There's upside there for Espinal, right? So I include those guys in. It's not something I worry about too much.
Okay. Yeah, no, I just definitely want to I think it's like something I've been thinking about, and I don't know if I'm overthinking it. It's something I notice sometimes. And I feel like when I look at my teams, I'm like, well, am I forcing this stack too much? Like, maybe it's not a good team. Not that it's not a good team, but it's not a good build. Correct. Like, that's the thing I try to think through a little bit for sure. So,
well, and the other thing too is I build 150 almost every night. So I'm not going to babysit every single lineup and make sure of that. But if you're playing 3 lineups or 1, if you're playing a single bullet, then it's why bother stacking the 6, 7, 8, 9 for the Dodgers when there's all these other ways that you can use a lot better names in your lineup. I get that.
Well, yeah, I've been doing some single entry 3 max content, Jordan, and I've been kind of entering 1 to 3 mainly. And I do like doing that. And yeah, it's one of those things. I'm sifting through teams and trying to say, oh, does this look good? How's this look? And it's just something I think about because I'm sitting there looking at it. If I was running 150, yeah, I would not think about this as much, but I didn't know if that is something you think about because we all have different processes. We all think about different things. And maybe it's something that now you'll think about. Maybe it's something you'll be like, okay, Mangone's a moron. Why is he even thinking about this? Which is perfectly fine, right? Sometimes you take some value from stuff. Sometimes you don't, for sure. So, yeah. So do you want to run stuff like this or you want to adjust anything else? What's your kind of thoughts here?
I feel pretty good about where we're at. I think we should build some lineups and see how it's shaking out.
Yeah, let's build them and see how it's shaking out. I'm very curious. I was thinking of being more aggressive with my my team total numbers. I want to run it how it is now, but I was thinking it's more, maybe it's interesting to be a little more aggressive with it if you really have a strong take on something. And I mean, I think you're more conservative than some other people. I know a lot of people at our side are a little more Big T, they'll just lock them in and roll. I'd be curious. Maybe we could run something where it's pretty aggressive after just to see what it does, right? Maybe we bump the Yankees to a 7 implied total or the Jays or just someone we bump them really high and just see kind of what happens. So
yeah, we can do that. I'm down. It's always, I think it's a really good way to learn Sabersim and learn what happens when you do different things just by messing with it. I will say when it comes to actually time to build your lineups, I would be careful bumping a team higher than 1 run above their implied total. I know last time I was talking to AP about the stuff, he was doing that, right? He had he pulled his build up. He had guys that were 8 implied runs, stuff like that. The one thing to note is that just since it's using the sims to build the lineups, if you bump the Yankees from a 4.2 to an 8.0 implied run total or something like that, there's just not a lot of sims to use at that point. And you can get some kind of weird results at that point. So, but let's play with it. Let's see what we get. I mean, one thing, this is starting to look kind of how I think it'd be fun to attack this slate.
Okay.
All of a sudden,
well, explain why. Tell me, you're the one who's seeing it. So give the people the example of why. Someone might be looking at this and be like, I don't like this. This looks stupid. Why do you think it's good?
I mean, with how good the Yankees and Astros have been this year, the fact that we have a slate where it's Severino and Luis Garcia on the mound. So I get it. But I mean, these teams have been elite and there is no one going to play them tonight. So getting to a build in 150 where they're in my top 2 stacks, my 3rd stack is Tampa Bay. I'm still, getting a little bit of exposure to that hot Wrigley game here. I dig this. I like this. It's allowing me to feel more comfortable at chalky pitching on a slate where there's not a lot of other ways to go, right? I think if there were other opportunities, I'm still getting some Musgrove, which I kind of like here. Again, he was one of the names I mentioned here. I think pitching tonight to me seems kind of simple and there's not a lot of easy ways to get off of these 2 elite guys. So getting to the lower owned stacks, I just dig this. This is kind of what I'm looking at here. Any night where you can just get an elite hitting team and nobody wants to play them is a good night of baseball DFS to me.
Well, I like it. And one of my reasons yesterday, Jordan, when I went to the game, so I was Dodgers, Rockies, but I did say to myself, I was I know the Dodgers are not going to be owned, right? But maybe because of the last 2 days and Marquez on the mound and Urias, I'm going to get somewhere's going to be lower ownership than I expect, right? Like I heard yesterday, the Braves were higher than people realize. And like, it felt like the Dodgers got at least a little suppressed from that. So maybe that helped because of the guys in the mound. And I mean, you got a guy like Brendan Rodgers, who was against the lefty yesterday. Everyone worried about your eyes. Rodgers went yard, you know what I mean? He was like 6%. Like, and it's just like, when you attack a spot with like 2 elite arms, there's times where people are like, they're just not going to go there, right? Like they might go to one side, but they might not go to both. And that's already just going to make you unique. You're going to have those not 1%ers, but single digit guys mixed in. In this slate, you'll definitely have a lot of single digit guys on this one. Of course, Aaron Judge is a one-off. He'll probably be mixed on through teams because there's a lot of, one thing to think about is there's a lot of like cheaper offenses that are gaining ownership. So like maybe an Aaron Judge one-off does gain some ownership today. I'm not sure. Where do we have him at? I'm curious.
Right now we have Aaron Judge at 11% owned. And like, when was the last time he was? I feel like that might be right. I mean, he's 6K. The pitching chalk is expensive. Like, I think you might get that. And to me, it's like, when are you going to get another opportunity to play Aaron Judge below 15% anytime soon? And much less, I mean, look at the rest. Aaron Rizzo at 4.4. I mean, Anthony Rizzo at 4.4. Like, come on. I don't know. I like how that looks. I like how these builds are coming together.
Oh yeah, I don't disagree with what you're saying for sure. I think you're bringing up really great points. Let's look at the pitchers real quick. Yep. And if you guys could, as we go to the pitchers, please like and subscribe this video. Helps us out a ton over here at Run Pure Sports. If you have not signed up yet, what are you doing? Now is the time. Be sure to get in there. When you get in on that, you get so much stuff here at Run Pure Sports. You get all the sports for one price. You get Sabersim. You get it all. So be sure to check that out. Also want to talk about the Discord. We've had a ton of great calls in the Discord that you want to check out. DC on the Up the Lock show. He's going to be on that moving forward for MLB. So if you sign up now, that's where you get to hear DC's baseball content where he talks about those MLB winners. And also want to talk about Underdog. If you have not signed up for any baseball contests and you've been playing any of them, be sure to use that code RUNPURE. You get a $100 match deposit bonus for your first one. So be sure to check that out.
Sweet.
So, Jordan, give me the pitchers. Let's pull them up. Let's talk about it a little bit here. We got Aaron Nola. We got Logan Gilbert, Joe Musgrove, Adrian Hauser, Ian Anderson. We got Mitch White, Severino, and then Brubaker. So we did not get Garcia, right? He was in our pool, correct? Who else was in our pool that we didn't get? Is there anyone I'm missing here?
I think Garcia's the big one here.
Okay.
And like, again, I don't know. I'm maybe just okay with that. If the Yankees end up becoming my favorite stack on the slate, like I don't know if I want to go get a ton of Garcia. This looks pretty good to me. I think like Nola and Gilbert kind of stand out as the elite names up top here. I do think being over the field on Musgrove is interesting here because it's not like the Dodgers have the best, total tonight here. And I think it's really nice direct leverage off of or not even direct leverage, but a different direction from some of these top arms. Pitching looks pretty good to me. I'm kind of happy with the way this worked out, especially knowing in this build how different I'm getting on the hitters. But what do you think?
Yeah, well, the one thing I'm trying to think through a little bit. So sometimes, what was Garcia's ownership today?
Yeah, we have him at 16% right now. 17%.
Oh, okay, so that's good. So one thing I think about a lot whenever I do target an expense, like not expensive, but like more of a known name, like a guy you're typically like, how many times am I going to target Luis Garcia this year? Typically, I like to do it with ownership. Like if it's like, sometimes it might be like, let's say I'm deciding between like Aaron Nola is a good example. Like if I told you, let's target Garcia, let's target Nola, you could make the argument the value in targeting Nola
is higher.
I agree. And it
might
might be worth it to play more Brave stacks over Yankees and stuff like that. I'm not saying I love playing the Braves, but I guess the point I'm getting at is you can make an argument sometimes, and I don't think this is the best example because Garcia versus Nola is a big gap, but when the pitchers seem like they're on the same level, especially projection-wise, because I don't think they are here, but if one is going to gain significantly more ownership and even seems like a good arm, you're still targeting a good arm no matter what. And if you are going to do it, doing it with the leverage makes some more sense. Zach, you get what I'm saying there?
Yeah, no, 100%. And actually, one of the things I had talked about doing here right at the start of this was maybe being a little bit closer to even with the field on Nola. And I'm curious if we do that instead and we set his max exposure to 50%, if that lets us get to some more Brave stacks here.
So let's see. We had 8% Brave stacks before. Now we have 50. And yeah, that pumps it to 13%. Almost double, right?
Yeah. And I mean, we can go a little bit further too, 15% Brave stacks. I think I totally agree with what you're saying. And I think that is one of the better, we talked about all these good, baseball teams that are going to get no ownership on the hitting side tonight here. Well, the Braves give you the best overall direct leverage against that NOLA chalk there. So I like the idea of pumping them up a little bit and getting just some exposure.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I think that's good. Here's another thing I'd like to do. So we think Cincinnati and Chicago are going to be the chalkier spots today, correct?
I agree.
Okay. So can we just look at the Cubs and Cincinnati teams and say, which ones are you like? Why are they unique? What is making us get exposure? Like, even though they're gaining ownership, how are they different? What do we like about them? This is something that I'll be going through when I do my single entry 3-max stuff. I'm down to eat chalk, right? Because it's not a bad spot to eat chalk. But when you do it, you have to find ways to be different. And then we kind of get a look at my process a little bit and go through these. What is making these teams unique here? Do you see anything that's sticking out? Because it's jamming in Nola and Gilbert, right? One thing I was thinking maybe it could do is maybe it goes a full 5-man stack of the Cubs, and then it goes a Yankees 3-man. You know what I mean? That makes it a little more unique. What are they doing? I see a bunch of Cubs Reds. I see that 5-man Rays with a Reds. That looks like a really interesting route. What's some of your thoughts here as you're scrolling through these teams?
I mean, so here's what's interesting, right? Is our ownership projections are not sky high on the Wrigley game at the moment. And they might get higher. Maybe these guys do get that 20%, 25% ownership here. But honestly, because of the way this is projected right now, look at this lineup. This is a Nola and Gilbert and then a 4-4 stack of Reds and Cubs. But the reason this lineup kind of works for this particular build is because we don't have a single batter that's projected for over 15% owned here. So at the moment, the Sabersim projections and the Sabersim ownership projections just kind of seem to think that this game won't be as super chalky as we expect. Part of that might be, and now that I'm thinking about this, I'm talking through this, I think we are under projecting the ownership for this game right now because we're also under projecting the game. So I think that's part of it. You are correct that if these ownership projection numbers were higher, and maybe we should go back and bump them up. I think we would get more builds like this where it's we have the Reds 3 stack, but then we have the Rays 5 stack behind it,
let's bump them. I want to see what they look like. Cause again, these are things that I think about, for instance, Hoop had a really good team in the Millie Maker the other day. And the thing that I had noticed, and if you guys, if you're Run for Your Sports members, you watch the premium show, we talked a lot about it. If you remember that slate, a lot of the routes that felt like people were going was, especially Big T said, he's I just don't see how these top end pitchers fail, right? They're really good options that you can go to. And what happened was when you played those top end arms and you wanted to jam in the Dodgers, right? Because you wanted to put them in there. Well, there was one spot that you had to save then, and it was with your mini stack. So it was with an Oakland mini stack. It was with the Pirates, all those different combos. The one thing we talked about on the premium show was Patrick Corbin. And I was if I go cheap, that's who I would go to. Very simple. I think you can go long enough and have a big game. And what happened was if you played Corbin and then you played a top end arm, you were not only able to get a Dodger stack, but you were also able to get another mini stack that was expensive. And that was the thing that was different on the slate. If you're playing NBA DFS and everyone's punting with a point guard, you can say, let me spend up for a point guard to be different. One thing that you could do is I'm not only going to spend for the top end 5-man stack, I'm going to spend for my top end 3-man stack as well. And that is going to be a way that makes your lineup different. One thing I think we could look at, and I think this is a slate where we're getting a lot of 5-mans. After we go through this will be something we do next. I say we look at what the Adrian Hauser teams look like. And those are going to be unique teams and just see what kind of builds those do. And maybe you see the Adrian Hauser teams and you say, I think this is a good, unique approach. I want more Adrian Hauser because I think it's a unique approach, and you'll maybe move from 5% to 12%. Again, I want to look at that. Let's do the Cubs Reds thing first, and then let's go look at that. Because again, these are things that you can do. People are always oh man, I had no time during lineup lock. You can do these things at 11:45. You can do these things after the slate ended and be rerun the slate an hour. Basically, let's say the slate ends and it's 1 a.m. and you're bored. You don't know what you're doing. You're just I'm up. I can't sleep. Run through some stuff in Saber and practice some stuff, learn and try to get better. These are things that you can do 24/7 if you have the time to do it. Right, Jordan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of different ways to play with the tool to explore different things. So for this build, all I did, I went and bumped up basically all of the bats in the Wrigley game up to 15 to 25% owned ish. So, one thing you can see immediately is we're getting way less of them now. If you tell Sabersim, hey, this game's going to be 20% owned bats instead of 15% owned bats, we get a lot less. But now we can go ahead and look at lineups that have Cincinnati's.
Jordan, go back real quick. Go do whatever you said, undo it.
Okay.
I just want to, this is a point. I mean, I want to tell us, look at the first team. What does the first team do? It's literally everything I just talked about. What's the first team there look do?
A Hauser team, right? And then getting,
and what's it do? It jams in. I mean, it doesn't jam in the expensive Astros. I will say that. So that's where I'm wrong. I thought it was, you know what I was thinking, because obviously I saw Astros and Yankees and I'm like, that's an expensive combo. It's actually still making it difficult. Probably the way you do it is you might have to get off of NOLA for like an even cheaper arm to make that work. But again, that kind of told me something. I thought it was going to be that double expensive route, but it's actually not. So we'll go back to the Hauser team. Sorry to cut you off, but I had noticed it and I thought it was really interesting that it was team number 1 on your setups.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, it is getting you to the expensive Yankees bats here, right? We have what is this? A 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the Yankees bats.
Which tells me it's difficult to get to those expensive Yankee bats today because it forces in Hauser and the mini stacked in order to get NOLA with it. So the more I look at this, it actually is telling me that these expensive stacks like the Yankees, Jordan, they're not going to be that easy to get in there for sure. Like if you're going to play NOLA and Gilbert and then a Yankee stack, you're going to get the really cheap Yankees. Like you're going to be forced to. So that is, if you naturally go that way, you're not going to be able to get NOLA and Gilbert together. Like good luck with that.
Yep. 100%.
All right, so let's go back to what you're doing with the Cubs thing. Sorry to cut you off, but it's a good talking point, obviously, because we're talking about the slate. So what are you seeing here with the Reds?
Yeah, I mean, so now we can look at the Reds, right? And like, I mean, this is just showing us all of our stacks. So here, I mean, it's just a Votto and Pham 2 stack, and then we 5 stack the Astros here, right, with Nola and Gilbert. So kind of what you were describing before here. Here's a similar lineup. We get to a 5 stack here of the Reds. It's Nola, Gilbert, but we do have like a less popular 5, 7, 8 mini stack of the Brewers here in there. In this one, Contreras plus 5 Reds, Nola and Gilbert, but we get Torres and Donaldson, 5, 6, 2 stack for the Yankees. So yeah, I mean, if you get these constructions with the chalky bats, it's mixing in those lower owned pieces to get that lineup different enough to work.
Real quick, go back to that team. So this is something I would do by hand. Like this is just part of my process. Sometimes I would see like, not that this is a bad thing, but I would be like, maybe I would change like, I'm trying to think of like salaries and how they get out. I'd maybe change like Almara or a Senzel and I'd swap them for a Contreras and I'd put like either a punt catcher or like the cheap Yankee catcher. And then I'd upgrade to another like expensive, like a Giancarlo Stanton. You know what I mean? Like those are things I look to do sometimes. So like the 5-2-1 is fine. But like what I notice is this is still going to be a unique team. If I get those 5 Reds and then I get the 3 big Yankees bats, like I'll see Torres and Donaldson. Those are Yankees bats I want to have in there. And then I'll be like, how can I make it where I get off of the Contreras chalk and I get in a Reds catcher and then I upgrade one of the outfielders to like a Stanton or a Hicks or whoever the guy is. Maybe I can get the Judge. I think it's difficult to get to Judge there. But those are things that I would look to do as I hand build stuff and why using an optimizer, I think can be important even when you're playing single entry stuff. Because you could look at that team and that's a great single entry type team. It gets you Nola, it gets you Gilbert, you get 5 Reds, but you get the contrarian part of the Yankee stack. And I would just make a slight change in order to kind of make it work. And maybe it's getting off of Gilbert where you're not on the Nola Gilbert combo. And instead you go to a cheaper pitcher to get an Aaron Judge. And I'm trying to think of what cheap pitcher we could go down to that like isn't too much less. That's still a good elite arm. Who's a guy you could think of that I'm trying to like put in there?
I mean, like any of these guys, right? Like here, let's go back to the pitchers. I mean, they're so like any of these other names here are like Severino is an interesting one here to just throw in there as like.
And $900 can go a long way, right? So like the 900 along with Contreras and changing like Almora, like that might be enough to grab Judge. It probably isn't. It's probably still off by 500, 600, but you get what I'm saying. It probably grabs Stanton very easily, but it's definitely things that I look at. And I think it's a good thing as obviously, again, if you're someone that, and this is, I kind of talk about this a lot because I'm someone that I don't use the optimizer for 150, like, and just like kind of run stuff and like call it a day. I do feel like I like to have a little bit more control with it and mess with it more. And like, those are the type of people I want to like start using an optimizer. I think can help them get better and help them get there. And there are people that are listening that I'm sure are like struggling with that transition. So those are ways that I still use the opto, but I'm like kind of hand selecting it, if that makes sense.
And I think that's a great way to use it. I think, again, even if you're going to use Sabersim to help you get an idea of what like 60% of your lineup should look like, and you're going to fill in the other part, it can still be a huge help for those kinds of builds. And I think I mentioned this last time I was on here as well. We are working on building a lineup editing tool directly in the app. So you could pull this lineup up, make those changes directly in Sabersim, and then save the new version of the lineup. That's actually pretty far along on our end. And we're getting pretty close to releasing that too. So really excited about that.
Yeah, Jordan, that was me doing like the Bron and D Wade throw up, hey, the alley-oop home, right? That's how you host. So
yeah,
throw it home for you. But yeah, if you guys could too also, please like and subscribe to this channel. We only got like 7 minutes left. So just please hit the like. We appreciate it. Also, I want to mention, we got the Live Golf Show coming up, premium side with Big T and JSU in 7 minutes. So don't go anywhere. Just head on to the premium side once we end this show, and be sure to check that out. Jordan, we got 7 minutes. What are some other things you want to discuss here? I mean, I think we've discussed a lot. Maybe we want to go back and look at the Cubs teams. What's some things you want to look at before we get on out of here that you want to talk about?
I feel like we've done a pretty good job here today. The one other thing, maybe I think this would be pretty cool. So we've only done 150 builds today here so far. I think one way I'd like to kind of show this off here is if, maybe you're playing the single entry stuff, you playing a, 3,000 lineup single entry kind of contest here. You can use Sabersim and get a lot of value, as you mentioned here, by running these builds for single entries. And one of my favorite ways to do that actually here is we'll just build these, and then I'll talk about this here.
This is exactly what I wanted to look at. So I'm excited. This is stuff I like. So we're in my wheelhouse. I'm pumped to see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you could see when I was building that, right, that the ownership fade comes down, the sim precision comes down, right? We don't need to take as much risk in these single entry builds as we do for the 150 stuff. But we'll let these build here for just a second, and then we'll talk about that. But like one of my favorite ways of using this here is basically, instead of kind of full on hand building your lineup, using Sabersim, building 500 and then hand picking your lineup based on what you're trying to do. So let's pull this up here, and we'll talk about this in just a second. So what I like to do, and this is the way I do this, right? And I there's not a ton of slates where I'm going in and I'm just building like one lineup. But what I like to do, and let's get this build pulled up, is I like to just see what that very first lineup is. And I look for reasons to eliminate that lineup until I'm happy with kind of what is left over. Right. And honestly, right off the bat, I mean, this looks like the kind of lineup that I would play. 5-3 Brewers, Yankees, Nola Gilbert here. But, based like one reason, maybe I decide that I want to, I don't know. Maybe I decide I just want to see like, what are the paths to fading Gilbert here? Right. Can I do it? Does it work?
Yeah.
And okay, so I'll go ahead and do that. And now, Rays and Yankees with the Hauser lineup, right? And I get the best parts of both of these lineups, right? This lineup looks great. But another way you can actually do this here is going over here and actually closing your exposures completely and just looking at your pool and just looking through the lineups yourself. And you can get this kind of nice, big, wide angle here. Give it a second to load because it's loading 500 lineups, and literally just go through and look at these lineups. And, maybe you go through and add every lineup that you think is like kind of interesting. So maybe you think this one's interesting.
I love this, by the way. I've never used this. This is a cool part.
So you can just look, and again, like, I mean, you can use this however you want. I think there's a ton of different ways to use this. You don't
have to make a 500 person pool. Let's at least say that. You can do 200. You can do 100 if you don't want to sift through too much.
500 is probably overkill. You probably don't even need that many, but however you wanted to do it, right? And just slowly, add lineups here, and then at the end, go and review everything, and then pick what that final build you're going to end up using is. Right? Here's a Jays 1, 2, 3 Jays.
See, this is doing exactly the things that like I go through, and like I kind of like called it out. Like, I think a great way to build today is going really expensive expensive at the pitcher, cheap at the 5-man, find the unique one to go. Or if you don't go unique with it, you can just go unique with your other options. Like I love that Vlad, Bichette, like that team is like really awesome. That is one, like I'm going to star real quick, and I'm going to go back and look at. Like, I got it. I took a nice screenshot, Jordan. I'm going to go back and look at this. And what another thing you can do is, let's say you like this setup. You can say, maybe I'm not playing Brewers, but I like what this is doing. And if I got off of one of Bichette, Springer, Vlad, that's fine. And maybe you like the Cubs more, and you find a way to like hand build and put it in. But either way, it's telling me that like this is a good route to go in single entry contests.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah, it's definitely that's a good little team. I'm excited to go through this in a little bit and check it out. I lost an hour, obviously, because the MLB slate's going to lock a little bit earlier. Is there anything else you want to discuss or show, Jordan, or is this time to go and let the live Showdown guys, talk up some PGA Showdown golf?
I think we let them have it here. I think that was a great show. That's probably about as deep as we've gone into some of the baseball stuff here on one of these streams here before. So hopefully that was helpful for everybody watching. I enjoyed it. I feel like I'm pretty excited for this slate now.
Yep, same here. Yeah, I mean, I had a good slate yesterday, so that always makes it easier to go back the next day and like play some DFS, of course.
Yes.
When you have like the week long of just like misery, it makes it tougher to get up the next day and keep going through. But that is the lifestyle we have chosen. So, but that is going to wrap it up for us. Please hit that like and subscribe out the door. That way you can check out all the content over here at Run Pure Sports. Like I said, premium show coming up next with JSU, Big T. They'll be breaking that all down. And then after that, we got at 3:45 Eastern. We got the MLB show, Swing for the Fences. We'll be doing that. We'll be breaking it down here for free on the YouTube channel. But that is it for us, guys. Thanks a lot for joining. For me, Mangone, and Jordan, we will see you guys later.